Hi everyone, welcome to the business Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. Haven't been able to say that for a very long time. Welcome back, Tosh. How are you doing?
Good to be back, Meeta. You know, I've had a bit of a hiatus for the last few months, working on a various number of different kind of projects actually to put some good out for our clients. And you know, I'll let you guys all know about that when that's finished and coming up. But that's well on the way now, and I think we should be coming out with that big secret out by the end of the year anyway. So I've been working quite hard on that, Meeta.
Fantastic. We look forward to hearing more about that. You always add value and you bring it all in such a commercial way that people like us who need to apply it back in our organizations, we can take that immediately. So looking forward.
I appreciate that. I have to say, I've been on the other side of the screen as well. So I've been watching and it's been fantastic. I think Joanne's been absolutely first class, amazing.
Yeah,
I love her input. I know even when she's in the audience, input is amazing. But her stepping in like that, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
absolutely.
Nice vibe it was.
Thank you. Well, a shout out to Joellen, who I believe is in the audience again today. Actually, hi to everyone who attends regularly. We're very fortunate. Tosh and I have been doing these sessions, for those of you who know, since the beginning of the pandemic, back in March 2020, and they've evolved because our challenges have evolved and our needs as organizations, as people and as a community have evolved. So hopefully what we can continue to bring you now that Tosh is back in our world is an understanding of how to fix the challenges you're facing right now. So
this is not out of a textbook, you know, this has always been grounded in practical application on things that we're going through as well, that our clients are going through, that we're sharing, so you can learn from that. You know, what's the fastest way to learn is not through your own experience in real time, it's from other people's experiences. So, you know, we're experts in our field. We try to just navigate you so you don't have to, not that you don't have the headaches because they exist, but know how to handle them, not just manage them, right?
Yeah. You know, for me, Tosh, being a business leader and a people manager, there's so many times when I want to phone a peer and say, listen, this is what's going on, what would you do? Unfortunately, there's always a political reason if you've got somebody in the organization or outside, one, you can't get them when you need them. You know, something happens and you can't just bounce off people. So that's what I think this session is really good for. So to make it useful, we've got our chat box and Joellen's used it already. Thank you, Joellen. You mustn't get embarrassed. It's all true. It's all true. And it's just great to have an engaged and effective community, because what I do think we have in our world here, Josh, are people that care about getting success and happiness for people in their world, you know, that they want the best outcomes with the best people in their world and they don't want to waste time.
And it's a struggle. It's a struggle because you're also individual human beings dealing with other human beings. And you can see it from their point of view and you can see it from your point of view and then just but there is a right choice, or let's say there are choices that you can make that fit you. You just need to know what those options are, right? That's what this is going to be about.
Well, Tosh and I have bitten off probably more than we can chew because we give ourselves up to 40 minutes. We know that.
You know what happens when you bite off more than you chew, right?
No.
You chew faster.
Well, let's hope we don't talk too fast. But we wanted to give everyone an oversight or an insight into what we are seeing going on out there. And we've also put in the poll some of the other challenges that have come up. So we'll talk to you about that in a minute. But if you haven't put your thoughts or your votes into the poll, please do. But today, welcoming Tosh back and running through the challenges that businesses are facing at the moment. So first and foremost, we're going to be talking about the all-important, can an employer ask and insist that an employee has a vaccine, and what the impact might be on businesses and organizations. We know that in America, some of the big guys are doing one thing. Here, the care industry have said you have to, but there's a lot changing there. We then, you know, God, I don't even know what the rules are day to day. We do for the business. Kids, you know, people don't have to isolate if someone in the house is COVID positive. So there's lots of different rules. So we're going to cover self-isolation for the rules at work. If an employee has been double jabbed, do they need to tell employers? So again, Tosh and I are going to run through all of the scenarios around COVID. I mean, because it's still here, isn't it? There's something like 40,000 cases today. 200.
And you know what? We're also at a constant risk of overcomplicating it. You know, I always do the KISS principle, you know, keep it simple, stupid, and just sort of dumb it down from my own mind as well, to make it very clear. When you know what the parameters are, the rules of decision making or actions, then you can just apply that to whatever the situation is. So we're going to go through all that as well, Meeta.
Brilliant. And that's what I love about you, Tosh. You've got your parameters, and then you get us back to thinking, well, what are the outcomes you want? And then we work from that. So I like that because it clears things up. Hybrid working, are there any employer and employee rights we should be aware of? So again, you're probably going to tell us it's simple, but it'd be good to hear it. What's evolving and transpiring as challenges and wins out there.
I've definitely got a viewpoint on that I think people might see their situation slightly differently.
Okay. And then moving on from that, the contracts around hybrid working. Should they be new contracts? What should they include? And then, my God, I mean, moving on to the poll, Tosh, the last topic we're covering is sick leave. So again, rules around sick pay. Again, the self-isolation question. Should employees be working from home? We've been now where sometimes, our team will say, I'm not feeling that great, but I'm going to work from home. And it's a case of, well, for employers, they need to consider what's in the best interest of their employees' well-being. Are they working or are they not? Sometimes the greys create confusion because productivity can be impacted, and that's where our poll comes in. So our poll is asking, what are the main challenges you're facing in your world right now? What are the main challenges facing your world right now? That's how I put it. So we've got vaccination prejudice. Tosh was like, oh, I like that phrase. What do you see as vaccination prejudice, Tosh?
What's happening now is people might be treated less favorably because they're not getting the vaccine. They're saying, I can't come into work, and all those things. And perfectly, it might be reasonable to be like that or feel like that about those individuals. But then you always have to look at the why. What is the motivating reason behind the person saying, I'm not getting the vaccine? Is it just being difficult? Well, that's a different category from somebody perhaps who's pregnant, or their religion doesn't allow them to take that vaccine, or whatever other medical reasons might be valid to not take the vaccine. So it's really a matter of looking at the why behind the no.
Well, I tell you what, this is huge, and actually is currently running neck and neck with productivity and engagement at 40% each, with sickness and absenteeism being 20%, because unfortunately, these all roll into one. That's what I'm seeing. We have a new category of diversity based on people's preference for taking or not taking this vaccine. We've got people that are anti-vaxxers. I actually, in our organisation, Tosh, I know you and I, when we were sort of catching up with each other before today's session, you were like, well, how are you taking it, Meeta? And, how are you dealing with it? And I actually have some people that haven't taken the vaccine yet. And I was like, oh, it surprised me. But why did it surprise me? Where am I coming from with this is not where everyone in the world is going to be coming from.
And that's exactly it, isn't it? It surprises you because you didn't see it the way that they're seeing it.
We're going to
have to decide as employers whether they're being reasonable or not. That choice we can make. Yeah.
But this unconscious bias, which frankly has come from a time of extreme stress, and we're living in, impossible times, people are going to be very quick to judge. So as employers and people leaders, we need to detangle ourselves from what we might personally think. And as you talk about, Tosh, what are the outcomes that you want? So vaccination prejudice is an interesting one, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We're hearing about people that are saying, well, she's coughing and she hasn't had the vaccine, but she's had a negative lateral flow test, so she's fine. And it's like, So all of a sudden, whole new issues, Tosh,
It's overcoming people's perceptions of situations. That's worse, isn't it? Because our perception is our truth. So how we interpret things or how we see things. So hopefully if we can slice through that and get some clarity on, look, this is the way that we're looking at it as lawyers and looking at it as business owners from a practical sense. So you've got both applications. That's got to be something that will work for you. One thing I wanted to cover, which I haven't done this for a while, which is that if there's any questions you've got, please put them in the chat, because we'll ask them during this session. That's our promise to you every single time. And on the one or two occasions, I think, where we've gone over time or we've run out of time, we do a follow-up video making sure those questions are answered. Yeah. And also, we're not in some ivory tower. Pick up the phone, call us, email us, connect with us on LinkedIn. We put up so much stuff, certainly over the last 18 months, 2 years, and just helpful stuff for business owners. No catch, or just stuff that will be tremendously practical on day-to-day level. So, reach out to us and be part of our herd, so to speak.
Indeed. And I've just popped the hello in the chat box to show you how easy it is. And you can even put a private message if you don't want the rest of the group to see. So on that note,
questions, please do interact. Don't feel shy about it. We might as well use us while we're here.
Indeed, indeed. And in terms of our poll, currently we have got productivity and engagement up at 57%. So if anyone can give any specifics in the chat box about what is actually the problem, please let us know. This hybrid working world, Tosh, it's evolving as we speak. You know, as I said, we're having to check in with our unconscious biases about a new subject. Also, people are having these biases around people in and out. And, you know, for employers, how are we supposed to run businesses and create that maximum return on investment when we're dealing with such huge emotive people issues? And the first one being, can we even ask employees, have they had their vaccine? How can employers approach that, and how should they do it to keep everyone working on the same page and feeling part of a team?
I want to just go back a little bit in time, Meeta, before I address that question. It connects to it, which is, back in the day, people wanted to work from home and employers said you couldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? We all found out that everybody was lying. And when our hand was forced, everybody made it work. Why? Because we had to make it work. Now we're slowly flipping back again, and people have got quite used to working from home. Maybe they don't want to come into work, they don't see the benefit, but employers see that from a very different way. Yeah. So it's applying all of these different things, but the principles of what we're applying is always going to be the same. The law may have adapted slightly in terms of the rules on how to deal with certain things in specifics, but generally it's kind of the same in terms of how you deal with a situation. So the specific question here is, can employers ask employees if they can have the vaccine and what effect may they have on the businesses, right? So this is not the thought police. This is the issue. Always is you can do anything you like. Remember my approach to the law. It's never says that you can't do anything. There's no law that says you can't do anything. You can unfairly dismiss somebody if you like. I'm not suggesting you do that. It's about what are the consequences of your actions. If you break the speed limit, you can break it, but then you'll get penalty points or a fine, which is why probably most of you have done that, right? I'll put it that way. So the question here is, what's the consequences? Well, if you're asking it in a derogatory way or in a sexist way or something that's discrimination, obviously that's going to have an issue, but that's not where employers are coming from. Yeah. Yes, you can ask the question, have you got the vaccine or not? Tick. Because presumably you've got as an employer, certain things in place where you want to make sure people are working safely.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, it doesn't then just mean to come down on a ton of bricks. The question has to be why. If their answer to that is unreasonable, as in, no, I'm not getting it or what have you, that's a different situation that can be dealt with through disciplinary if appropriate.
Yeah.
If it's because they're pregnant, it has to be possibly covered by something else. You make them work from home. Or if they can't work from home, we have to look at a different issue. It's always going to be fact sensitive, Meeta.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because we've just had a private message from Emma who asks, and this probably brings it home around, well, you can do what you like, but what are the risks when you do something? So Emma asks, can an employer refuse to extend a fixed term contract if the employee refuses to have a COVID vaccination? And this hits right in the heart of what's actually happening out there at the moment. These are the practical challenges that businesses are facing and employers are facing.
So that's quite a loaded question, Emma, in the sense of two things. Number one is with a fixed term contract, it probably depends what's in the contract. Because if it's a fixed term, presumably you can end it for whatever reason you want to, which is the end of why the fixed term period is there in the first place, right? So if it's a genuine fixed term contract, I mean, let's give you a silly example, like building a building, right? Well, by the end of the building being built, that's the end, isn't it? There's nothing else. But if it's a fixed term contract because it's a period of time, and then it's like a rolling contract, and it just keeps going over and over and over. Well, what happens, Emma, after 2 years, they apply the same rights as a normal employee does, which is the right to not be unfairly dismissed. So then the question comes, so what I'm saying is up to the first year, yeah, that could be a perfect reason not to extend it. They can't make a claim anyway, apart from if there's something in the contract that gives them some sort of a right. Maybe you ended the fixed term in breach of that contract.
Yeah.
Once you've gone past 2 years, the question is refusing to have a COVID vaccine a fair reason to dismiss somebody? Now, it's a lawyer's dream, that word, isn't it? What's reasonable? We're going to do that all day long. And the answer has to be, well, what are the circumstances? Meeta, let's do a quick role play for Emma, right?
Yeah.
So I'm an employee, and you're saying to me, Tosh, I want you to get the vaccination, otherwise we're not going to extend it. Well, I'm going to say, well, no, I can't get the vaccination because my religion doesn't allow for it. What now?
So are you over 2 years or under 2 years?
Under 2 years.
Okay. So your religion doesn't allow you to get a vaccine. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So Tosh, you have been coming into the office and we've been quite clear about the fact that we would like everyone back in at least 3 days a week. How can you ensure that you can continue working with us safely if you don't have the vaccine?
I don't know what that answer is, and you're absolutely right. So that puts me on it. And also, in terms of the back foot, it puts me in a position where the employer is saying, this is why we can't make it work the way that you want to work it, which I'm presuming is don't get the vaccine and stay at home. There's got to be some crystal clear reasons, Emma, why that doesn't work, and perhaps that converts into crystal clear quids, some actual monetary issues that we have. There must be a reason we want them in. It's not just a feeling, is it?
So what I would say to Emma as an employer, I would say first and foremost, look at the contract. If it's coming to an end and there's no precedent of just rolling it over, then you can say thank you and goodbye. And if it's before 2 years, there's very little comeback on that, right, Tosh? Is that
well, if it's on the grounds of religion, which is a discrimination issue, right? Then you'd have to be very clear on what your answers are, I suppose. Yeah. Otherwise, if it's just nothing to do with that, and there's no valid reasons that would fall on those things, that could be enough sufficient reason not to renew it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I love this group. We're getting some challenging questions. This is exactly what we love. Right, Sam is asking, having the vaccine is a medical issue. So it should be a confidential medical point. So why should employers have to inform their employee? Or why should employees have to inform their employer?
Because it isn't a confidential matter. It is, Sam, you're right, but it isn't the right of the employee not to let the employer know what they're doing to make the situation safe. So if the employee wants to not disclose it, which is their right, Sam, as you've just said, well, then the employer also has the right to make a call on it based on that lack of information.
Yeah.
I need to know this because of this. You're not telling me that. You want to keep it confidential. That's perfectly all right. But now I've got to make the assumption that you don't have it.
Yeah.
As a result, you can't come into the workplace. As a result, you can't work from home because of this, or you can work from home, or whatever the arrangement is.
Yeah.
So if they can keep it confidential, but the employer can make a decision based on that information that they have available.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other points in that some employment contracts have a clause that says that you will share medical information with us and our occupational health partners, and that you will, we have the right to know what comes out of that, but it won't be used in anything but, something like that. So some contracts do have medical clauses. So
I suppose, Meeta, also, even if it's in the contract, the employer still might want to keep it confidential, and then we're still back into the same scenario where we'll make a decision based on the information that we reasonably have available.
Yeah.
But we let them know that before we make the decision. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you want to keep it, but then this is what we have to decide, and this is probably the way we're going to go.
So an employer can say, well, you haven't told me. Now, so they could say, take a lateral flow test instead, if they're comfortable with that. They could say, work from home instead, or they could say, we're not happy to accept those risks because of our health and safety policy, and you can no longer continue your work with us if you haven't had the vaccine. Would that be an unfair dismissal, Tosh?
No, absolutely. Those are reasonable steps to put in place, right? I mean, the key issue that we're talking about here is people not coming into work for whatever reason, right? Or they're not giving us the safe. You as an obligation, as an employer, have an obligation to provide a safe system of work and a safe place of work. You have a duty. So that means if you haven't put reasonable steps, that doesn't mean everything possible. It doesn't have to become a hospital. But if you haven't taken reasonable steps, and those reasonable steps will have followed from an assessment that you would have done, a workplace risk assessment, you will have ticked certain things, right? Yeah. And if there isn't a vaccination that's been carried out, well, what's your plan B that is the equivalent of that? You just said so, or whatever else it is. If all these things are not ticked, or option A or B or whatever it is, that meet your minimum criteria for, yes, it's reasonably safe, well, then you can make decisions based on that information, whatever you want, including dismissal.
Well, and Inga's actually put the point in that actually the vaccine isn't 100% protective anyway. Yeah. And could you make it? Inga's also asking if we could make the vaccine a part of a health and safety policy that the organisation stands by.
So we've got to be careful about that, only because if it's part of the policy, and then the reason that they can't do it, I keep going to religion or maternity or medical reasons, right?
That's discrimination.
According to the policy, they would automatically could be dismissed for it. Whereas what the law says is, well, is it still reasonable in all the circumstances? Because you discriminate, the only person they couldn't do it was because of their being pregnant. which means you'd have to look at the other alternative options open, which is what we're doing anyway, Meeta. Can they work from home?
Yeah.
If they can't reasonably work from home until this issue is gone, well, then you can make decisions.
Well,
you could include dismissal.
Well, let's work on the basis, Tosh, that this isn't going anywhere, because there's new variants. We've got, the highest rate of cases that we've had in 6 months, and we're going to have to evolve as a world, as a country, as a business community to live with it. Let's expect, because that's all we know right now. So, Pam, for example, says they understand if it's required for a position. However, if it's not, why should an employer require to know this? But is it about the job you do, or is it about the people you're around? Like, it's both, isn't it? I'm not sure.
From the employer's point of view, it's about what are your duties here. Forget the moral side of it.
Okay.
Moral is a personal choice, right? We all know what the right and wrong thing to do is. We know already. But from a legal point of view, what are your obligations? Well, your obligations are to provide a safe system of work and a safe place of work.
Yeah.
And whatever that entails, you want to be able to stand up and say, if something happens to that person, well, didn't you see that was going to happen? Yes, but we did all these things to make sure that happened. Whether that's an industrial site, whether that's an office where we're talking about COVID right now, it can be chemicals that you're dealing with, or an office-based environment. It doesn't matter, but obviously what is a safe system of work and a safe place of work will vary depending on those different factors, right?
Yeah. It's it really does feel really grey, and I think has any case law come through the system on this yet, Tosh? Any cases out there? No.
There has been about dismissals because people refuse to come in because of COVID. Those things are starting to come through, but we're going to address that a bit later on, in fact.
We are. Okay, so if anyone has any other thoughts or questions, this is great. Bring it, because exactly this is happening. People are having specific scenarios which we can then talk about and help you apply in your world. So the next step is, well, what if somebody does have to self-isolate? What are the rules for business?
Someone's at the front door.
And someone's at the front door, but I'm going to have to leave that.
Well, you can answer it. People know things happen live. That's fine. In fact, I'm sure that we want to know now who's at the door.
Oh, good. All right. I'll be right.
So there's Amazon deliveries. She should have ordered it at the right time. So while I wait for Meeta to come back, let me crack on with the next part anyway. So the issue here is we talked about if they get a double jab, do we have to tell them? And then we got to the point. Oh, you were that quick.
I was that quick. It was a parcel.
Okay, cool. So let's go back to where we just were before you went.
Apologies. Yeah.
So the last thing we were just talking about whether there's a requirement to let them know whether they get a jab or not, right? And if there's any rules for the employer to know. So we've covered that as well.
Yeah.
Then we talked about, can employees refuse to come into the office? That's where we are now.
Yes.
So this is a common thing that a lot of clients are coming to me with. They have their sales teams and they're saying, well, I don't want to come in for a meeting for whatever different reasons and what have you. Guess what I'm going to say where it's okay for an employee to say, I don't want to come into the office?
Never.
No, reasonable. It's reasonable. When it's reasonable, always this comes back to the same fact-sensitive assessment, right?
This is the challenge, though, Tosh, isn't it? Because pre-pandemic, pre and post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, the clarity around when you can work remotely, when you need to be in, what's expected, it was really clear. And now this word reasonable I feel grays everything. And I feel almost like organizations need to have, this is our, where we like to be. And there might be a little bit of gray this way and a little bit of gray that way, but these are the parameters we work within.
Where's the gray? Who's it coming from?
The challenge arises from people's perception of how one person is treated versus them, because they're never in the conversation. So then it's like, well, I don't want to come in because, my friend's friend got it and I saw them for 5 minutes. And then someone says, well, there has to be 20 minutes of direct contact. And they say, well, yeah, but, Mark went to a festival and he decided, he needed to isolate because he went to Reading. And it starts becoming an issue where people feel unfairly treated. And that's where I think employers, and it takes up time and headspace, which is not adding value, So
I guess my point, Meeta, is that the grey is coming from employees. I often, without it sounding patronizing, the employer and the employee relationship is a little bit like a parent and child. You can't blame the child for not knowing what we've got to guide them. So it's us that have to become crystal clear on what the different rules are, right? So when an employee is refusing to come into work, again, it comes down to whether those are legitimate reasons, ill health, all those things need to be covered by a sick note. If they're self-isolating, that's also okay. But remember, the rules of sickness still potentially apply. If they can't get a sick note from the doctor to cover that for whatever reason, then it doesn't apply a sickness absence. And if they're refusing to come in and we've got nothing to back up what they're saying for whatever period of time, there's no entitlement to receive payment for that either.
Yeah.
You receive payment when you attend work and you are able to work. Okay, when you're ready, willing, and able is the actual phraseology. So if they're choosing to self-isolate and they take a week off, they don't get paid for it unless their contract allows for it. There are government schemes which allow some sort of things to get payments for those things, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, that's the official, when someone's been asked to isolate, they get financial support. This, I think, is more about when people choose to self-isolate. Because if someone's been told they have to self-isolate, they've got the email from the doctor or you get a text, then that's it. That's the proof we need as an employer.
I agree, exactly right. But to be clear,
yeah,
I guess the issue is, do they get paid for those or not? They just need a sick note from the doctor. It's still the same thing, even if they're not. And they're just in self-isolation. To be covered for any absence, it has to be holiday, it should be sickness, or it should be governed by some other arrangement. Yeah. Compassionate leave is also unpaid, right? Yeah. Or any other issues, it just has to be confirmed what your position is.
Yeah. So if an employee refuses to come into the office because they've been in close contact, that can be a situation where the employer says, no, you have to come in.
Well, we have to be reasonable in the circumstances again, right? So if we go against what that person has said, we have to assume the employee is telling the truth.
The thing is, businesses, organizations are having to close down departments, they're having to, change how they work, sometimes even more impactfully than in the pandemic, because whole, teams of people are self-isolating. So as much as we're talking about reasonable, it's like saying reasonable, but one hand's tied behind your back. It is quite tricky at the moment. So I think that's where
I agree with you. But I'm saying we can't just look. Majority of people, we can just rely on their word. I think that's probably correct. But the issue, we wouldn't be even having this conversation if there wasn't a trust issue. Otherwise, we just take it their word, and then that would be the end of it, right? Yeah. So my point is, either, just to be crystal clear from the legal point of view, they either cover the period of absence for whatever reason they're absent for work. And if they isn't covered under a sick note or any other form, they don't get paid.
Yeah. Well, Alessandra is asking a very interesting question, and a very important one, actually, and hopefully easy to solve. So Alessandra is asking, what about an employee refusing to come in because they don't feel that the employer has taken reasonable steps to provide a safe place?
I'm going to say something horrible now. Their feelings don't matter. They do matter, obviously. What I mean is that's almost it's a cheating question many times, right? Because if they don't feel the employer has taken reasonable steps, why? Sure, the onus is on the employer as the parent, in the analogy I was giving, to show why it is that they are reasonable steps. We should have told all the staff, hey guys, this is what's happening. Here's our policy document. Yeah. These are the things we're putting in place. If you don't get the vaccine, that's fine. We'd like to know, just because it would be useful to know. If you don't want to, whatever, we need to know that this is in place. If those things aren't in place, then we have an issue, and then we'll have to have a one-to-one with your manager via Teams to decide what the next best course of action is, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't feel it, it's a little bit like saying, what if an employee calls up, you know what, Meeta, I feel like watching Netflix today. I don't feel like coming in. Is that all right? Well, it might be. But it's, they can't make that call. It's got to be based on something that is grounded in some real world application that has some substance.
Yeah.
So Alessandra, I would say that it's on you to say, no, this is why it's safe. If they still disagree, well, that's either going to be they're not getting any pay because they're not being ready, willing, and able to come to work, or it might even be strong as disciplinary action if the circumstances are right, because you should send the message out to people to let them know what is or isn't acceptable. And that's the last resort rather than the first one, right?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely about preempting any concerns and having a really clear, COVID policy, how we keep our people safe at work. Could be a link on the website, could be something you mail out to your team, or it could be something you talk through on a Zoom, every few months, or even monthly, to say, guys, this is what we're doing, this is what we've added because this has happened, or this is what we've taken away because it's no longer required. So keep talking about it so they know it's important to you as an employer. And the more people know about how you want to keep them safe and the steps you're taking, and then they're being held to those standards, the more safe they will feel. And then, as Tosh said, they won't have an ability to say that they don't feel safe. There'll be proof.
And Alexandra, I'm maybe making a guess here. If you haven't got something in place and you don't know where to start, or you've got something you don't know whether that meets what's required, there's Google it. Because there are government guidance on exactly what makes a place COVID secure. Let's call it that, okay? And there's 13 different types of guidance, 4 different types of industry. So everybody is covered. So you don't need to guess. It's already in there with a checklist of the things that are expected. So the policy is there. If you're having trouble with that, you get in touch with Meeta, you get in touch with me, and we'll help you how to get that done. But otherwise, it's all there.
Yeah. It's really interesting. During the pandemic, we didn't have issues with productivity as much. People were actually quite surprised by how productive people were being, but something is shifting, at least in the room today, because productivity and engagement is the leading challenge that organizations are facing at the moment. So it'd be good to know why. If anyone can pop into the chat box why, then Tosh and I can delve in a little bit deeper on that one.
I like this because these are obviously things that the audience are dealing with right now.
Yeah.
This is, so if there's any other stuff or we haven't answered it deeply enough, then please ask more questions about it. I'm happy we're both happy to answer whatever we can right now.
Absolutely. Okay, Tosh, we're going to be moving on to hybrid working and our employer and employee rights that we should be aware of within hybrid working. Okay,
so I think it goes back to a little bit is, why do you think we need a contract at all, Meeta?
So as an employer and a business owner, I would be thinking, has the law changed on what I need to offer my people? No. So we already had some hybrid and flexible working arrangements. We had a process that people needed to go through to apply for it, and we had a thinking strategy around whether we would grant that or not. So actually, that process hasn't changed for us. What's shifted is, as you said, all of a sudden people can. And so the yes or no tick list has added a few different reasons for the yes. That's all. So from my perspective, I don't feel that there are any new rights, just that the existing ones need to be applied robustly.
So my view on a contract is they're only ever needed when things go wrong.
Yeah.
Because if everybody's happy, and everybody understands what the rules of engagement are, what they're doing, what do you need a contract for, right? So the point of the contract, when you put the hybrid contract, and definitely I'm not saying don't have one, I'm saying understand what its purpose is for clarity. If there's any doubt, I wish I could give you an example. We could pick a word, right? I don't know. I'll pick the word trustee. I'll put one. That might mean one thing to you, Meeta, and it might mean something else to me, even though it's the same word, right? What the level of it is, or who it applies to, or what the person you're thinking about when you say that word, all those things. So in the same way, the contract is supposed to give clarity. This is our definition of trust. This is how the hybrid situation works. This is where there may be some variables, but where there's those variables or there's any gray, you need to speak to your line manager to get the clarity. Yeah. So the more crystal clarity and structure you can have in there, saying this is how we do stuff, the better. When we first started doing hybrid arrangements, there weren't the contracts. People had grown-up conversations with each other and said, well, that's what's happening. You work there and we do that, and we get used to doing it. Yeah. Now they're thinking we better start putting things in writing, because why? Employees are saying, well, I'm confused. I had to work in the office before, and now you agreed I'm working from home, and now you want me back in the office again. Well, which one is it? Well, I mean, you need to look out the window and see what reality is happening, which is that, yes, you were working from home, and now we kind of need you back for these reasons. Yeah. I think one of the key things that aren't getting through is, what is the difference between working virtually? I want us to articulate that. What is the actual difference between working virtually and in person? What do you think?
Tosh, I think it's culture. I think it's depending on the role and whether the role can be done virtually. The next step then is, can it be done as well virtually? And that is, specific to each individual role. So, and a manager, whether they have 5 or 10, I mean, it's hard to manage 10 people effectively, but, depending on their team, they've got to look at that one individually and have clarity on what's expected. And I think, that the important thing is to be on the same page. So if somebody applies for flexible working and you say, okay, you put in a caveat, you say, we're going to try it for a month, then we're going to review it. These are the parameters we're going to be looking at being successful. Don't wait a month if you're having a problem. I'm not going to wait a month if I see challenges. And at the end of that month, we will decide as an employer whether it can be continued or not.
Yes.
It's time to do that. But I think that, it's very time consuming, Tosh, I think is what employers are finding. Listen, we've got some comments. I love the interaction. So I'm just going to go back to the chat box. So Emma actually has a question around, what if others in the workplace are unwilling to work face to face with someone unvaccinated? Yeah, it's a challenge. What would you say to that, Tosh?
I think what we've advised on that, Emma, is the same thing, right? So presumably, let's go back rather than looking in the wood for the trees, let's look at the solution. So what are the circumstances? What have you got in place where somebody can work unvaccinated in your office? Presumably, you've got some risk assessment policy which makes that okay.
Yeah.
If you haven't, then you're exposing yourself to potential risks or health and safety issues and all those sorts of other things. So, if they're unwilling to, presumably you've got something in place which allows that unvaccinated person to work there, which means it's reasonable for others to work with that person. If that person is still refusing to, despite you putting those things in place, Emma, and explaining that, well, then they're being unreasonable. You need to decide whether it's time to take more formal action, because you appreciate. Look, I'm not Mr. Let's get the stick out with everybody and start taking disciplinary action for everything. But there comes a point where you've got to send a message out about how we're doing stuff. And certain things are not acceptable. It's a little bit like Super Nanny, isn't it? With kids again. It's about setting some very clear boundaries of what reasonable behaviours are, expectations, and what the consequences are if you don't meet those expectations or standards. That's all. Yeah.
And I think it's really important as employers to say to your managers, or if you are a manager, make notes of all your conversations and make notes of what the outcome is, because at some point you are going to need to reflect. You do want to ensure you're not setting a precedent that isn't,
paper trail for sure.
Pardon?
You want a paper trail for sure.
Paper trail, exactly. So we've got some more questions. I've got a comment from Joellen actually. I think this is around the productivity and engagement vote. Last year it was all hands on deck. So many employees pulled out all the stops to help their companies. Now it feels as though it's the same old, and the urgency isn't there anymore. And some people aren't motivated in that way. Yeah, we talk a lot about how much trust and confidence built up in that time, where everyone felt engaged, they felt cared for, they felt considered, and productivity shot up. I think now, because employers want people back in the office, people are feeling a little bit hard done by. Is that what you think is going on here, Tosh? What do you think?
What is it that motivates people? We don't always wake up going zing. Yeah. And if you don't have that motivation or that inspiredness, or you're not inspired to be motivated, whatever it is, for what every day, guess what you do? It's discipline. Yeah. It's having going on even when you don't feel like it, I suppose, and then getting to that because you know what the bigger goal is. It's a whole topic by itself, isn't it? What motivates people, what inspires them, what drives them, those sorts of factors. Absolutely, we should cover it, Meeta, for sure.
I agree. It's something that we advise our clients a lot on, because it's one thing hiring great people, it's another thing retaining them and helping them be the best that they are. And this is where I bring in things like personality profile, learning styles, team fit, motivational exercises, cultural exercises. It's time to go back to not just what people do, but why they do it. So as you're working out what good looks like, let's establish why people work, because at the end of the day, that is what will get them doing what needs to be done. And my battery is dying, so it's falling out. Hold on one sec.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to do while you're plugging that in for Joellen is her organisation, the way she's described she does things. If you think about it, a lot of the things that you're having, whether it's motivating or not, Joellen, there's a lot of loyalty there because you look after them, because you've got their back. When it hits the fan, you're not just looking at the company manual on how to handle it. You're talking to them like human beings. So when you have those sorts of things in place as well, there's a lot of loyalty that's created that people want to work for you anyway. So, I appreciate motivation and all sorts of things happening. In my own company, we've got some of my employees whose relatives are dying as a result of COVID, and they can't go and visit them, and all sorts of things are happening. And we just, I don't start looking at the manual. You start doing things like a human being, and people will appreciate that because it's real. and raw, you know.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I certainly got that from Joellen from what we've done over the many weeks and months of her talking about what she does in her organisation. So.
Yeah, indeed. And Inga has highlighted that as well, is if you involve people in decision making, then they feel part of a bigger picture. So rapport is so important. God, I mean, I hope people don't mind, but Tosh and I are coming to 40 minutes, but we've got one more comment, which
we've got a few actually. We've got, I can see a Shane, and I can see another one.
Brings up a really good question. Shane said, to start with, we allowed an employee to work from abroad during lockdown and paid their taxes, but this employee is now saying that they want to do this continually. What should we do? Should we continue hybrid working? And what do we need to consider? So I think, first of all, Shane, it's about, are you talking about hybrid working as an organization or for that individual? And as an employer, it comes back to your key performance indicators that measure success. So I talk about success and happiness in equal measure. So we have business parameters that parameters that we measure, and we have wellness parameters that we measure in our organization. So whatever the parameters are that are important to you, you've got to do some reflecting. I think it's important to establish, is your business winning now? If it is, and you're hybrid, why not? But if you're not, then consider it. And then you drill that down to each individual. That's how I would approach it. And again, as Tosh and I said, we're covering the surface level, but if you want us to talk to you more, or you want us to walk that through with you, pick up the phone, drop us a text. All our details will come out with the recording of today's session.
My advice on that would be, well, what's your motivating factor? Is it the fact that you're having to pay her more money because you're covering her taxes, which I presume you agreed to do on a temporary basis while she was abroad because of the global situation, which is a really generous thing to do? Yeah. Or is it that you actually need her back? Because if it's more money that's the issue, Shane, well, then address it.
Yeah.
Look, this was only in place to cover it at that time. We're happy for you to stay there, but just know that you'll have to pay that additional foreign tax. We'll cover whatever UK scenario there is, as we're obligated to do, but you will have to do the rest. If you're refusing to do that, that might result in a disciplinary issue, right? Because it's a legal situation in terms of taxes. If it's that you physically need her to be there, Shane, and you can show why that need is there or why it's preferential, then obviously that's a different matter. That's going to be resulting in a disciplinary issue. The law says you've got to be fair and reasonable in all the circumstances when you come to a decision to dismiss. Yeah. So if it doesn't work and you can clearly show what that is, and I'm not going to be able to answer that in like 2 minutes like now, Shane, but if you want to have a more in-depth conversation, then we can have that. But I would ask, my first question is, what's your motivating factor? Is it that you're paying more money, or is it that you need her in there? Know which one it is, and then take actions accordingly.
God, I mean, this is such powerful stuff. Shane's question about, do we continue hybrid working? Again, as I said, drilling that down into as an organization or for the individual, really important to reflect on. And then Inga asked the question, well, how do you measure wellness? Because actually, this is probably what's happening, is that when people were remote and they had more of a sense of well-being because they felt cared about and they felt safe, they gave more back. Whereas now, circumstances have changed. People are being forced, some willingly, some less willingly, and their wellness is being impacted. You know, Inga, I have a long list of parameters. You can do the how are you feeling out of 10. You can have pick 3 words that describe you, and you can have something that you get your guys to do once a week, or you can do a little straw poll of feelings. But actually, I think what it's really about is asking your people. I would think this is a great cultural exercise. Ask your people what wellness looks like to them. I think it would be really powerful to do that. And again, we can talk more about that. Got a question here actually from Emma, who is a really important question. If you can ask people at interview if they've had a COVID vaccination at all, or would you do it after an interview? What's your thoughts on that, Tosh?
Absolutely no problem asking that question. The issue is not asking the question. The question is, if it doesn't what the outcome you'd like it to be, is how you're reacting to it. Yeah. No, I'm not going to do it. Can you tell us why? No, I'm not going to tell you. Well, okay. Well, then we'll have to make a decision based on the information we have. And then we go away and we come back. Our policy says we need to do this, or you can come in if you haven't been, even though you haven't told us whatever reason. Yeah. I bet most people will say why they don't want to. You will get a reason, even if the reason is as vague as I don't want to because it's confidential.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty sure most people won't.
Yeah, and it hasn't become one of those protected questions that you can't, that if you ask and then you don't hire on the basis that you'll be sued, right, Tosh? I mean, I think that's what people are worried about.
And it's not. There's no reason not to ask that question. It has relevance. Your risk assessment is relevant to that.
Perfect. So we've got a couple. I know we've gone on, but it is our first time back, so we've definitely had a lot to catch.
Fine. People are still on, so if you send us a message if you've got to go. Maybe you can see, or anyway, you can see the recording afterwards. Since it's on a roll, let's carry on. I just want to start Inga's how do you measure wellness thing. I look at it in a slightly different way.
Okay.
So I know you said about 1 to 10. So I'm not that kind of 1 to 10 kind of guy. I normally do two things. From my own workplace, I ask them. What? We have breakups in the day. We're on Teams still, right? We have breakups in the day. I call them slap and tickle sessions, which sounds probably inappropriate, but it's just about not to talk about work.
Yeah.
Just to break the pattern. And you know what? I eyeball them. I talk to them. You get a feeling, and I'm also quite perceptive. If something's upsetting somebody, I'll have a separate Teams call with them. Are you all right? Yeah. That's my measure. If there's a measure where there's something more physical, or there's stress or sick leave or anything like that, the measure's got to be going to a doctor. We can't sit there and guess all day. You go to somebody who should know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But so it depends what you mean by that wellness, and it depends what you mean by measuring it. So it's anything from eyeballing it to Meeta asking them some questions directly on it to getting a medical report if you're really worried about it.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many ranges. And I think one of the most powerful ways to eyeball is when you get in a room or on a Zoom for a one-to-one, you start by checking in and saying, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
And not, jumping straight into the right, what have you done? What have you achieved? But actually checking in and as a manager saying, you know what, I've had a bit of a challenge this week. So, I've been feeling like this.
It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open. It should be that kind of workplace. When you're sitting there whining all day about something, nobody wants that. But it's okay to be open about stuff. If the forum's right and the people are right, speak. Don't not do that. That's right. I like that. Measure wellness.
Indeed, in many different ways. And Joellen mentions that they are seeing that with some of their clients, loyalty isn't there as much when they're larger organizations. So actually building that trust and confidence to then ensure that when a business or manager does tell an employee, yes, you can, or no, you can't, the employee feels that they're in a relationship of trust and confidence, that they respect the decision. So actually loyalty, the trust, building, that's what, as managers, you've got to do well. And we've been doing a lot of remote management training courses because you can't take it for granted that you communicate in the same way externally, and now hybrid, it's all changing. So if that's something that you want to talk about more or have questions around, please do reach out to Tosh. Now we have one more comment from Alessandra, who mentioned that the number of days an employee is present in a host country over a 12-month period must not exceed 183 days for tax purposes. So I think that's helping Sean with his Shane, with their question.
That's an accountant's thing to ask, and then you need to decide whether you want to take the hit because you've been taking the hit all this time by paying more taxes because they're abroad or not, right?
Tosh, we're 47 minutes in. Can you, in a minute, sum up sick leave and rules around sick leave? And is it any different to normal rules?
Okay, so essentially no. So sick leave, in a sense, doesn't mean I'm sitting there coughing and spluttering. It means the first week is self-assert. You have to provide a sick note. You won't get a doctor's note normally for that. Or you get a sick note from your doctor, or a fit note, they call it, right? Which should be a sick note still, but anyway, I'm probably old school like that. And the sick note can cover the days, the qualifying days. They can backdate it to when you were first, so it's completely covered, right? Yeah. So sick note means that. One of the questions, and what that means, the same applies for isolation. If you've got a sick note covering it, great. Or if you've got something confirming it, that's great. If not, you don't come into work, you don't get paid unless your contract gives you some sort of entitlement for it, okay? Yeah. And thinking about employees working from home if they are sick, it's a personal choice, isn't it? And it's also a little bit different. So, in the old days, if you used to come into work, suppose I broke my leg and I can't come into work, guess what? I'm off sick because I've got a broken leg. Now, I can work from home. So I would have been off sick, but I can work. I just can't walk to work. I can sit at my desk and do the computer. So, let's just keep it really simple. Either you are feeling well enough to work or you are not. That is it. Then you sign yourself with a self-certification, or you get a doctor's note after 1 week being off.
Yeah. And what an employer needs to do and a manager needs to make sure is that they've got the clarity on what a good day at work is, regardless of where that person is based for that work.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's all in the prep. Wow, that was a whistle-stop journey through some really powerful topics. I think, as always, we scratched the surface, but so much interaction and hopefully solutions being brought your way. Tosh and I are back this time 11 a.m. next Thursday with a new topic, hopefully as immediately useful for you to take back to your world and apply. The poll will give us a bit of a hint on what to cover. And when asked about what your main challenges are, you have...
Joellen, she wrote a very nice comment there.
Oh, bless you. Thank you, Joellen. Yeah, always good to have Tosh back. Always good to see you on our sessions, Joellen. Thank you. And thank you, Shane and Inga. And I just wanted to say that the polls show that productivity and engagement is the biggest challenge, with 57% saying that's a challenge. Vaccination prejudice at 28%, and then sickness and absenteeism as third. So we got some work to do.
Right there, Meeta, isn't it?
It's spot on.
Let's not hit it on the head. How to address productivity and engagement issues is something you should have to think about.
Yeah. Well, as always, Tosh and I are available outside of our sessions as well. Look out for our contact details in the recording that you'll get in your inbox later. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the comments and for your input as well. It's been great to have you back, Tosh.
Thank you very much, guys, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.